This is Chris Murphy, the junior U.S. Senator from Connecticut. After the stunning raid to capture the dictator of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, Democrats immediately and unsurprisingly criticized what was ultimately a legal law enforcement operation to bring a narco-terrorist to justice. And this criticism included Senator Murphy, one of Trump's most outspoken and dumbest critics.
I mean, clearly this is wildly illegal. This is a president who has been operating illegally since he was sworn into office, stealing from the American people, seizing spending power.
What's illegal?
Now dragging America into a war overseas. The president cannot run a military operation of this size, cannot invade a foreign country without coming to Congress first, without allowing the American public to weigh in.
So Senator Murphy thinks that this is something that should have been debated in Congress and voted on, which would have completely erased any and all element of surprise to capture Maduro.
America doesn't want this war. Nobody asked for this because it has nothing to do with American national security.
First of all, what war? We were in and out within 3 hours. Second, it has a lot to do with national security.
Listen, Venezuela is not a security threat to the United States. They're not threatening to invade us. There is no terrorist group like Al-Qaeda operating there that has plans to attack the United States.
Not Al-Qaeda, but Iran and Hezbollah does have a presence in Venezuela. Not to mention that their oil is being used to support these groups, as well as China and Russia.
Yes, they produce drugs, but those drugs go to Europe. Fentanyl is the drug that's killing Americans. That's not coming from Venezuela. Venezuela produces cocaine. 90% of it is not coming to the United States.
Guys, it's just cocaine. And only 10% goes to the US. It's practically artisan small batch cocaine at that point. We should be thanking them for the exclusivity. But it should also be mentioned that in August 2025, the Trump administration offered a $50 million reward for the arrest of Maduro, accusing him of being one of the world's largest narco-traffickers and working with cartels to flood the US with, wait for it, fentanyl-laced cocaine, which Senator Murphy obviously doesn't think is a national security threat.
You know, there's no question that Maduro was a destabilizing force, not just in Venezuela, in the region. And there are people celebrating in the streets all over South America and Venezuelan expats abroad. So is it fair to say that there is some benefit in Maduro not being in power?
But what changes?
Gee, I don't know, Chris. Maybe the fact that the dictator is gone? But sure, aside from the regime collapsing and the guy who was in charge for the last 12 years being in handcuffs, literally nothing has changed.
Delcy Rodriguez is a very powerful figure in her own right, handpicked by Maduro. Russia and China still provide enormous support to that country. What changes? Why would Venezuela stop its export of drugs, its harassment of U.S. interests in the region? There's really no explanation for how American interests are changed at all with a Rodriguez administration that right now seems to be intent on carrying through and carrying forward the policies of Nicolás Maduro.
So let me get this straight. We shouldn't have removed the dictator because his vice president might be bad too. That's the logic. Don't arrest the bank robber because his accomplice is still in the getaway car.
In 2019, you wrote an op-ed and you called for Maduro to be gone. You said, let's get one thing straight. There should no longer be any debate about Maduro's lack of democratic legitimacy. The Trump administration is right to put restoring Venezuelan democracy at the center of our approach to this crisis. A return to a stable democracy is in the interest of the Venezuelan people and the United States and the hemisphere.
Whoops!
Tom Cotton was just here saying that he hopes that there are democratic elections. Isn't that what you want?
Well, the rest of that article was a criticism of President Trump's early moves to saber rattle around regime change.
Quite frankly, I'm surprised that Dana Bash called him out on it. But his response was ridiculous. I didn't like the way that Trump was saber rattling. So back in January 2019, Trump issued this statement recognizing Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela and declared Nicolás Maduro's presidency illegitimate. And in response, Chris Murphy, along with Ben Rhodes, Obama's deputy national security advisor, wrote the following: "Chest-thumping declarations that melt away over time weaken American power and credibility. In Venezuela, if the armed forces continue to back Maduro, then last week's move may come to look feckless, while offering Maduro the opportunity to rally his domestic and foreign backers against U.S. intervention. Reckless talk of military options only compounds this problem. There is no credible U.S. military option to invade Venezuela, and it would be dangerous and destabilizing to do so. The alternative, though, is not for the United States to stand idly by while Maduro continues to plunge Venezuela into destitution and chaos." So on one hand, Murphy is like, the orange man is chest thumping and everyone knows that he's never going to invade Venezuela. But on the other hand, Murphy's whining about Trump not doing enough to remove Maduro from power. But then, nearly a year later, Murphy wrote another op-ed, this time for Univision News. "Of course Maduro is a brutal dictator and America is right to seek a return to democracy in Venezuela. But there is a right way to try and bring an end to the Maduro nightmare and a wrong way. And predictably, Trump has chosen the wrong path, and in the process may be further cementing Maduro's hold on power." So according to Chris Murphy, what would have been the right path? Trump could do this through an international relief exchange program, where revenue from oil sales could be used to purchase food, medicine, and other necessities. Of course, the one time we tried something similar, namely food for oil in Iraq, it was a case study in corruption. But don't worry, folks, I'm sure this time would have been completely different and totally successful. Many rightly doubt that Maduro would willingly participate in a relief exchange, but if he refuses to cooperate, his claim that food scarcity is solely due to sanctions will be exposed. And with the eyes of the world upon him, he would be forced to choose between siphoning oil revenue into his own coffers or feeding his people. The offer of a relief exchange would dramatically weaken Maduro's argument that the US is to blame for the suffering of the Venezuelan people. "Oh sure, dictators hate being exposed. Oh no, the world knows I'm starving my people. I better stop," said no dictator ever. Chris Murphy's grand plan was to essentially shame a guy that has no shame. But everyone knows that Maduro would have just taken the money, kept starving his people, and laughed while doing it. But hey, at least we would have tried the right way. According to a guy who has never solved a foreign policy crisis in his life. The White House needs to stop pretending that chest thumping is policy, put aside the triumphalist rhetoric and maximalist strategy, help revitalize the Norway-facilitated talks, and lend a hand to the Venezuelan people to break the current unsustainable stalemate. But unlike the Brandon administration, it took President Trump to be able to effectively break that stalemate. But now that an evil dictator has been removed from power, Senator Murphy should be celebrating with the Venezuelan people, right? Right?
I mean, this clearly has nothing to do with democracy or the Venezuelan people. The Venezuelan people are, worse off because they now, have a country that is, under threat of continued invasion.
Continued invasion. Chris, we left. We were there for 3 hours. That's not an invasion. That's a long layover.
Maduro's people are still in charge. There is no democratic awakening happening in Venezuela today. And the people that are left in charge of the country are still interested in political repression, are likely still interested in exporting drugs, mainly cocaine, out of the country, mainly to Europe. And so for the Venezuelan people, nothing has changed. If anything, their situation has gotten much worse.
There's no democratic awakening happening today. What, did he expect Thomas Jefferson to rise from the grave and write them a brand new constitution by lunch? God. Things take time. These people are insane. Anyway, that's it for now. If you want to support the channel, head over to my merch store at don'twalkrun.shop. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you next time, if there is next time.